Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are jumping into a really fascinating stack of research. It's focused on a powerful and I think often misunderstood economic model, the worker-owned cooperative.
And this isn't just theory. We're looking at a real-world success story that has, and I mean this, it's literally transformed thousands of lives. And at the same time, it's challenging some of the most, deeply ingrained assumptions of American capitalism.
Absolutely. Our main source material is all about a company called Cooperative Home Care Associates, CHCA. It's the largest worker co-op in the United States, based right there in the Bronx.
And that's our mission for this deep dive, to really unpack their blueprint for economic justice and to understand why their success convinced New York City to make this huge landmark investment to try and replicate this model.
And that investment was, what, $1.2 million in its 2015 budget? Which at the time was the largest commitment by any U.S. city government specifically aimed at growing worker co-ops.
Right. And that kind of public faith, it just doesn't happen unless a model proves itself, proves it can actually move the needle on poverty.
To really get that, you have to start with the people. I was really struck by the story of Zaida Ramos.
Oh, her story is so powerful. I mean, when she first came to CHCA, she was completely stuck in that cycle of public assistance, bouncing between these minimum wage office jobs.
She said it herself, pretty bluntly. She was earning in a week what her family was spending in a single day.
The very definition of precarious living.
Exactly. But the sources show that 17 years later, as a worker owner at CHCA, that story is completely flipped. She has financial independence, her daughter graduated college, and Zaida herself has health insurance, dental, flexible hours.
And this is critical, an annual share in the company's profits. That's the difference right there. It's not just a job, it's a pathway to the middle class.
And it's not just her. This is happening at scale. CHCA has, what, 2,300 workers? And they all enjoy much higher wages, guaranteed hours, family health insurance.
All in an industry home healthcare. There's, it's famous for poverty wages and completely unreliable schedules.
Okay, so before we dig into the nuts and bolts of how they actually do this, let's just quickly define what we're talking about. A worker cooperative. It's a term a lot of people have heard, but I'm not sure everyone fully grasps the democratic core of the idea.
It's a very simple concept, really, but with pretty radical implications. Worker cooperatives are just businesses that are owned and controlled by their members.
By the workers themselves.
Exactly. The key principle is democratic control. One member, one vote. So every worker owner gets a direct say, in everything. Wages, management, company policy, how profits are shared. And advocates will point out that this structure, it just inherently pushes the business to maximize worker benefit instead of maximizing returns for some external shareholder.
And they tend to stay put, right? They become local anchors because the workers live there.
They rarely move.
Right. Okay, so let's unpack this. If you're going to launch a co-op in home healthcare, which, I mean, it's known for low reimbursement rates, this constant race to the bottom on labor costs, how on earth did CHCA structure itself back in 1985 to overcome all of that?
They founded the company on a two-part premise. It was about economic justice, yes, but also about quality of care.
Okay.
The founders basically argued that if the workers owned the company, they would logically vote to maximize their own wages and benefit. That's part one.
Okay, that makes sense.
But part two, and this is just as important, was that if workers were treated with dignity, if they were paid fairly and given really top-notch training, they would provide dramatically better, more reliable care.
A virtuous cycle.
A virtuous cycle.
Exactly. And the demographics here, they're just so central to the mission. This is economic empowerment aimed squarely at one of the most underserved populations in New York.
Absolutely. The organization is over 90% owned by women of color, operating out of the South Bronx, which has historically high poverty rates. Structurally, to become an owner, it requires a $1,000 buy-in.
Okay, wait a minute. That right there raises a question for me. If the goal is lifting people out of poverty, isn't a $1,000 buy-in a pretty big barrier? Even if you pay it over time, does that risk creating, a class of owners versus non-owner workers?
That's a crucial question, and it gets to the heart of co-op governance. In CHCA's case, that $1,000 is usually paid off through payroll deductions, which makes it much more accessible. And of their 2,300 workers, about 1,100 are currently worker owners.
About half.
A very large portion, yeah. It ensures that democratic voice is really widely distributed. And on top of that, the employees are also members of the Service Employees International Union, Local 1199. So they have this extra layer of advocacy and protection.
So you've got the internal democracy of the co-op, and it's backed up by the strength of a major union. That's a powerful mix. And the finances show this is a serious operation. They reported 64 million in revenue back in 2013, but the compensation numbers,
Yeah.
that's where it gets really interesting.
The contrast is just. It's stark. Their workers earn $16 an hour, and that's including benefits. You have to remember, the typical market rate for this really demanding work was hovering around minimum wage, maybe just over $8 an hour, with no decent benefits.
So CHCA is basically doubling the economic opportunity.
Pretty much. And beyond the wage itself, I think stability is the real game changer in this sector.
Right. I understand that traditional home health aides often have to just patch together hours from different places to make a living.
Precisely. That instability is, it's sort of baked into the industry model.
Hmm.
CHCA fights that by offering guaranteed hours. They average 36 hours a week compared to an industry norm that's, 25 to 30. They even pay workers for attending business meetings, which just reinforces the value of their time and their voice.
And then that kind of respect,
Yeah,
it must lead to incredible worker loyalty. Do we see that in the data?
we absolutely do. Their turnover rate is just 15%. This might be the single most powerful business metric of the whole enterprise.
Wait, say that again? 15% turnover? That's exceptionally low for any service job, let alone home health care.
It's about 4 times less than the industry average. And if you just think about this from a purely hard-nosed business perspective, the cost savings are immense.
Of course. All the recruiting, the screening, the training.
Every time a traditional agency has to do that, they are sinking hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars into the process. CHCA saves a fortune. And more importantly, their clients get consistent, high-quality care because that relationship with the caregiver isn't constantly being broken. It just proves that investing in dignity leads directly to a better bottom line.
And that whole efficiency is built on this radical idea of how to distribute profits. The data on the pay ratio is one of the most revealing facts in our sources. The statewide average CEO to minimum wage worker pay ratio in New York was something like 405 to 1. Just shocking.
Yeah. At its highest recorded point, back in 2006, the ratio between the highest paid employee and the lowest paid employee at CHCA was 11 to 1.
11 to 1. That is the clearest possible evidence that the mission is fundamentally different. It's an economic structure built for equitable distribution, not for C-suite extraction.
It's the democratic structure in action.
Yeah.
I mean, when the workers themselves, the people doing the hands-on care, are voting on the budget and electing the board, it just naturally puts a ceiling on executive pay.
Which ensures the profits are shared more widely.
Right, through higher wages and better benefits for everyone.
So the model clearly works for the people inside CHCA, but the leadership there knew early on that being a successful economic bubble wasn't enough. They had to change the rules of the entire home healthcare industry.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, they use this brilliant two-part strategy to scale their impact and protect themselves from that low-wage market. The question was, how do you grow and influence policy without getting crushed?
Strategy 1 was about raising standards everywhere, creating a kind of intellectual infrastructure for the movement.
That's where the Paraprofessional Healthcare Institute, PHI, comes in. CHCA launched PHI specifically to train other agencies on best practices and to fight for big policy changes. PHI, for example, played a big role in the campaign to expand the Fair Labor Standards Act, a huge win for workers everywhere.
And strategy 2 was, well, it was about guaranteeing their own demand. In 2000, they basically created their own major customer, Independence Care System, or ICS.
The stroke of genius. ICS is a managed care company that contracts directly with New York City for chronically sick and disabled adults. It now provides 60% of CHCA's business. That gives the co-op this reliable, high-volume demand. That guaranteed workflow is what let them scale from 500 workers in the late 90s to the 2,300 they have today.
So it's a textbook case, really. Prove a model works, then use policy and business savvy to guarantee its growth. Which brings us back to the city of New York. The city sees this undeniable success and decides to invest that $1.2 million to try and replicate it. What were they hoping to achieve?
Well, the funds were really championed by groups like the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies, the FPWA. They pushed this idea that co-ops offer something unique, what they called a greater medicine for apathy than just a basic safety net.
A medicine for apathy. I like that.
Right. They saw co-ops as a way to get marginalized communities directly involved in their own economic fate.
And the testimony from the city council hearings, it painted a really clear picture of that potential. We heard about Yadir Fragoso, who worked at Si Se Puede, a cleaning co-op. Her wages went from $6.25 an hour to $25 an hour once she became a worker owner. The argument was pretty simple. This is how you move people from poverty to prosperity
So
fast.
the challenge the city was facing was huge. The sources show that as of early 2014, there were only 23 worker co-ops in all of New York City, and CHCA was the only one with more than 70 people. Nationwide, the average co-op has, 11 workers? The ecosystem was just tiny.
So if the model works so well, why is the scale so small? What's holding it back?
It's a mix of things. A general lack of awareness, for one. It's also hard to get traditional funding since co-ops don't really fit that VC mold. And then there are, real policy and bureaucratic hurdles.
You mentioned the interesting paradox with CHCA itself.
Right. Even though CHCA is over 90% owned by women of color, it didn't qualify for certain minority and women-owned business privileges because the co-op had too many owners. The city's rules were just designed for traditional corporate structures, not for democratic, widely owned businesses.
Which shows how policy has to catch up. So the 1.2 million was this targeted effort to build that missing infrastructure. What were the specific goals?
You were very specific. The city wanted to fund the creation of 234 new jobs in co-ops, reach over 900 entrepreneurs with training, start 28 new co-op businesses, and help 20 existing ones expand. It was a clear attempt to inject lifeblood into a fledgling sector.
That's ambitious. But it also brings us to that central debate about scale. If CHCA proves you need to be big to change an industry, is funding 28 small startups the best way to get there?
And that's the debate that was happening right as the money was being allocated. Michael Elsis, the CEO of CHCA, he voiced this concern. He supports making contracting easier for co-ops, but he was skeptical that focusing only on small startups would really move the needle. He said, "I'm just not sure that setting up 26 new small co-ops will help change policy or practice."
Because 26 small businesses might succeed on their own, but they don't have the market power or political clout to force industry-wide changes. Not like a $64 million operation.
Exactly. Startups are risky, they're capital intensive, they're slow to build, they can solve a local need, but they don't necessarily fix the systemic rot of an industry.
So if bootstrapping dozens of tiny businesses isn't the fastest way to scale, what's the alternative?
This is where Hillary Abel and others from the Democracy Collaborative come in. They push what's called the conversion model. They argue that we need to focus on creating or converting larger businesses, ones that can immediately hire 100 or more workers.
The idea being you don't always have to start from scratch.
You absolutely don't. I mean, think about the market. There are roughly 200,000 small businesses in the U.S. that employ half of the entire workforce. And a huge number of these are owned by aging baby boomers who don't have a succession plan.
So instead of a slow, painful startup, the strategy is to find these established businesses with revenue, equipment, customers, and help the workers buy the company when the owner retires.
That's the conversion model. It instantly transforms stable jobs into high-quality, democratically owned jobs. It bypasses all those agonizing early stages of finding capital and customers. It's a much faster and I think potentially more stable path to achieving scale.
That seems like a really powerful idea, but does it solve the capital problem? I mean, if a retiring owner wants a big payout, where do the workers get that kind of financing?
It often involves structured financing deals. Sometimes you can blend traditional bank loans with owner financing, or you can use nonprofit intermediaries to help structure the purchase. It's still a barrier, for sure, but it's a more predictable financial challenge than trying to fund a startup from zero.
And this is where policy from other countries could really help, right?
It is. I mean, if you look at Spain's Mondragon or Northern Italy, Quebec, France, they have national laws that help co-ops access dedicated capital pools and, critically, get public contracts. The sources are really clear on this. Targeted funding, like New York's, has to be paired with real political power to change the rules.
This whole deep dive just makes it so clear that co-ops like CHCA are more than just a progressive idea. They are a robust, evidence-based way to do workforce development that actually promotes upward mobility. Like Wayne Ha from the FPWA said, we needed a new approach that would not only reduce poverty, but also promote upward mobility, and that's where co-ops can be an anchor.
That anchor concept is so key. By changing the business DNA to prioritize the worker, the co-op structure ensures wealth stays in the community. That low turnover, that 11-to-1 pay ratio, I mean, those data points speak louder than any economic theory.
New York's investment was a critical first step, but the challenge remains how to turn this from a successful niche model into a real economic anchor for the whole country. And considering the huge number of small businesses with owners ready to retire, should the next big policy push be almost exclusively on helping workers acquire and convert those businesses, rather than just starting from scratch?
What stands out to you as the single most critical factor for scaling this model? Is it really just about capital access? Is it about the political will to change contracting rules? Or is it just awareness, educating business owners about this as a viable exit strategy? It's a policy blueprint that really demands attention.